social network analytics specifically, I want to basically talk a little bit about like the history and some other concepts that emerged before this process. So in my sociology class, I remember learning a little bit about functionalism and Durkheim and how he was basically focused on a macro level perspective, where he believed that social level phenomena contributed to social stability and equilibrium. And so like kind of like think of like all these systems that we have working together and how they can affect one another. So like our respiratory system, our nervous system, our digestive system, it's like an interrelation. Like think of like family or education or religion. They're all like interrelated. So they all affect one another. And so also statistics are important, but also at the same time we want to make sure that we're not being dubbed with dubious data. There's a book called Stat Spotting, a field guide to identifying dubious data, and on page 27 it says that every number is a product of human effort, which I thought was pretty interesting because like there are different groups and people might be saying different things just to get them to push or support their agenda. And so like we want to make sure that like we are aware that this is unbiased information that's being given, or it's a holistic perspective where we have the full picture at the very least, because that agenda that they want to promote or draw attention to, I mean, it could be for a positive, but it's better to do our due diligence and ensure that we're getting the right source and that information isn't blindsided by other information. So like there are different types of groups, and we don't want to mistake groups for aggregates and also categories. Groups are people who interact with one another one way or another. And yes, this might not make sense in a social network for now, but it'll connect in a sec. But aggregates also see themselves in the same place and they appear in the group, but they're not like in the group, like they just take their chips and dip. And then we got categories, and these are people who have similar characteristics. We're also going to talk about a little bit about like influence and selection and how like people are more susceptible to being part of certain groups based on different types of similarities, such as like we're in the same age group or we have the same race and whatnot. But there are so many things that like we have to cover before that. Like for example, groups itself has a bunch of different not I shouldn't use category here because it might get confusing, but groups, there are so many different types of groups. So like for example, there are like primary groups, which consist of kind of like your immediate family members, close friends, neighbors you're close with, those that like kind of like give you a sense of belonging, where like love is like needed and wanted. And then there's like the secondary group, which is like much larger and relatively like temporary and like anonymous too. Sometimes it's more anonymous, I'd say. And then formal and impersonal in comparison to like the primary group, where you're kind of like more relaxed and chill. And so like, oh, I accidentally jumped the gun there, but we're back. So yeah. Um what I wanted to say here was like about the secondary groups, like they kind of like break down into primary groups, because like think about it like this, like let's say like your teacher assigns you a project and then you're like paired up with these people and like you get along with them and then you end up becoming really good friends. That's like a secondary group breaking down into a primary group, right? It's like, but like not everybody is going to be your friend from that situation. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a sec because it'll make sense. But like when you're in these groups, it's kind of like scary because yeah, like you have this in group now from your secondary group, so like this primary group, but like on top of that, inside of the primary group there could be even deeper grouping. So like for example, like the in group, and in group is kind of like where we feel loyal to people. We feel loyal to this in group. And so the issue with that is that it could also lead to rivalry between other groups. And so like now we have an in group, and like if there's an in group, there's got to be an out group, right? And so like that's also the same type of perspective where like a group you're not part of, it's a group where we feel antagonism towards, and like perhaps like like the similar feeling from being in a perspective of the in group. If I am in the in group and I look at this other out group, then I feel some sort of antagonism, and then also vice versa from their perspective. They're in group, right? And so like essentially there's like a reference group as well, where we can also evaluate and compare ourselves, and this might be healthy but also not healthy. It depends. I mean, I feel like like if you want to have a good comparison, you want to be able to continuum from left to right, and then middle being like moderate. And so like understand where you're at, where other people are at, but like also we're not just above but below, and like to kind of understand where your perspective is. But that's a reference group. Maybe you would consider that like some great group that you want to be a part of, or like some aspire to have similar traits of. And so like lastly, this is most relevant to this topic, we have social networks. And so these are like ties radiating outward from itself that like link people together, like having few friends that can extend their networks and like bring you jobs if you're looking for some. Or like I don't know if I want to talk about this right now, because we're going to be talking about this in the following slides when we go over like closing triads, and like we're going to talk about triads. So then now it's like order triads, and so we got some stuff to cover, so I'm just going to move forward. Okay, so we just talked about this. I think I just went backwards. I am going backwards. Oops. Sorry. Okay. Now I want to talk a little bit about social capital. And social capital is really cool because it's kind of like it helps you kind of like understand like how like feeding relationships can be fulfilling in other ways, and like might not even be something that we internalize ourselves like when we're doing certain things for other people and helping them. But like this is kind of like how the dynamic works. And so social capital is basically on three concepts, the resource, topology, and nature of the relationship. So I'm going to break them down from one by one. So like break them down one by one. Yeah. So resource, let's say personally I like making music, right? But let's say like I didn't know how to make music, and I had a friend who makes music, and I want to get a microphone. I don't know what a good microphone is like. I don't even know like anything to compare it to. Like I just wouldn't know. So like I have a friend who's good at music. He makes music at his place and he does it for fun. It's his hobby. He's a pro. So like let me go ask him, right? I know someone who does. I know someone who is good at this, and so now I reach out to this person, and the microphone I buy based on his input, it's kind of like determined by the resources in my network, right? That evokes that process, or I evoke in that process. So we also have our topology, which is this like structure of the network, relies on you, your preferences, and ability to build the relationship. And so like you're talking like both size and the type of friends that determine like the quality, the diversity, the number of like resources you can potentially access. You may like be friends with some people in your network, and you may hold respect for some and dislike others, and that has to do with the nature of the relationship that you're in. So for example, just because like I am in the same like network of other people doesn't mean that they are inclined to do me a favor if I ask them. Like let's say I'm Billy, and I have two friends, Joe and Jack. Or let's say I have one friend and it's Joe. So I know Joe, but I don't know Jack. But I want to know Jack. So I asked Joe, could you introduce me to Jack? And he's not obligated to say yes or no. And like his reasoning could be like, maybe I just dislike you. Simple. But like, you still are associated with this person because he's a part of your network. You're not friends with everybody in your network. Think of it kind of like, remember like the aggregate back in the other slide when we were talking about how like, like takes their shifts and this, like yeah, like we're here, but like we're not like close. We're not like in the in group, you know. I'm not loyal to you, like you're not my friend. Like that, to that degree where I'm going to do this favor for you, right? And so like that's okay with it, you know. I mean, that's okay because like I mean, you may be friends with some people in your network, you may dislike other people in your network, you may hold respect for some, and like these relationships involve trustworthiness. So that's your own trust, like how people perceive tr- trusting you, then like norms, obligations, and like even just simply like the feeling of being close with one another. And so like I said, just because someone in your network doesn't say yes doesn't mean you should feel some type of way. They're not inclined to give you help. Okay, move on. Now this is pretty interesting. So I'm gonna break it down here. So there was this guy named Mark Granovetter, and I probably butchered his name, but he was basically studying a concept in psychology by Fritz Heider, and that concept was called the balance theory. So psychology of balance theory. And so like he kind of implored that there are like certain kinds of triads being like, let's say, uh, three 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 entities together, like a triangle as we see here, right? And he basically thinks that like we find some to be stable and some to be unstable. And so like I mean it's like yeah, no crap, right? But hold up, let's look at this. So look, we have like balanced and we have unbalanced. So this is balance theory. This is not the strength of weak ties. We're gonna talk about that after, but first, you know, I want to talk about a little bit about Fritz Heider and how he basically focused on this idea where like pretend these are three individuals, right? J is cool with I is cool with K is cool with J. Okay, right? J is cool with I, J is not cool with K is not cool with I. Okay, right? J is cool with I, K is cool with I. And so the idea is kind of like the way the way I can explain it, I guess, would be like right now what's going on with like Ukraine. So like U.S., the United States, like we get gas from Russia, and I don't know like the specifics. I'm not too into the politics, but like I'm probably. I mean, I could definitely be wrong, but like we get a lot of gas from Russia under my assumption, and so like Russia's attacking Ukraine right now, right? And U.S. doesn't approve of that. Like Biden's like, no, like that's not cool. You know, we're gonna put up sanctions, and because like you know we don't approve of these attacks that you're doing against Russia. This is the unbalanced triad. That's like three parties, right? So like if Russia wasn't attacking Ukraine, then interests would be like more aligned, and that would be more balanced. Unfortunately, that's not how it is right now. And so like right now we are in like an unbalanced state, and that creates instability. And so like all these triads that we have, like this is just one example of a triad, but there's so many there are multiple triads, and all of these triads make all these allegiances that we have with one another very unstable, and that's really difficult to work through because you know if we go back and talk a little bit about like you know like the in group, the out group, you know that kind of antagonism we feel towards groups that we're not you know like like that with them, we feel like that's making the whole situation unstable because our interests aren't aligned. And so like you can kind of use this instability to model the expected outcome or like settled state for a network. So if you think of each each part of this as a node, and then each this part right here, like let's say I don't want to say it now actually because um I don't want to say it right now because I want to cover it in the next slide. But like, yeah, you know, I'll just hold off on that part. But basically, that's what like the balance theory was, right? And so like, let's talk a little bit about more importantly the strength of weak ties. Like, what is that? Like, okay, so Mark Granovetter, I believe he went to Harvard, and he wrote a paper called The Strength of Weak Ties. And so weak ties, he means ties as in like relations with one another, right? And so like his point was basically that relationships between different groups hold cohorts of society together. So like let's say you remember how I was talking about like how all of these triads make allegiances unstable, but like all of these allegiances or all of these triads, they kind of like are all these groups, different groups with different opinions, different stuff, whatever, right? All of them together glue society as a whole, right? And the reason why that's important is because once you think of that as a whole, so these different parts as a whole, like puzzles to a bigger picture, that's like a network. That is a network. That's not like a network that is a network. And so the reason why this is important is because once you start assuming this is how like things operate in a network where like there's instability and whatnot, and like you start thinking in that frame of mind, then you can think a little less severe than like a Ukraine and Russia. Let's say like more interpersonal at a smaller level, like with friends, right? So let's think less severe. Like where like let's say you like someone, okay? And then there are there's another person in this triad. So we're thinking about three people. One person you like and one person you just don't know. Okay? We don't have to think that just because they don't know that person, it's a negative relationship. It's not always just bad vibes just because you don't know someone. That's not how it is. It could be positive and then neutral. So I could like someone and that's positive, a positive relationship, right? And then there's another person and that's a neutral person. We have no relation. It's not love or hate. It's neutral. And so me meeting this person through our mutual friend is a good thing because friends want their friends that don't know each other to always know them. Or well, I mean like at least personally I'd say that too. Like I agree. Like I have different friend groups and I wish that like I could glue those two friend groups together because I feel like they would really get along and I would be more supportive of that initiative, to yeah, let me introduce you to this person. Like I think you guys have good similar traits that, so you guys would, take it off well. But that is called a triadic closure. And so that's the idea Mark produced. And it was rather than like focusing on like your highly clustered strong ties, he said focus on the weak ties. So why focus on the weak ties and not the strong ties? Well, if you think about it, the strong ties, they're going to want to let's say this is in terms of like a job application or a job search that you're going through. You're going to talk to your strongest friends, strongest ties, and you're going to ask them for a favor. And then they're going to think what are they going to think? They're going to be like, well, you're kind of like a weak tie. You're looking for a position right now. Not just that. What happened to your last position? What happened to this? What happened to that? You start thinking. And a strong tie wants to bring in other strong ties because they want to bring value, because if they could fill anyone for a job or a role, they want to bring in the person with the best value. And so it's harder to actually attain a position through a strong tie versus some weaker tie that you have, because the strong tie gatekeeps and brings other strong ties in instead of those weak ties. And so that's the strength of weak ties that Mark Granovetter shares. And I think this is really cool, and I think I'll talk a little bit more about this in regards to an example. Like maybe we'll look at LinkedIn or something. But let's move on. As you can see, my Dell Mobile wireless mouse battery is low, so speed this up. So we got hierarchical ordering, and like in one of my classes for like it was like about like communication in an organization, I believe, if I remember correctly. Maybe not. I can't remember which class it was. But we learned a little bit about hierarchical ordering. One second, I'm gonna close this dialogue that comes up. But so basically, we kind of learned about how like a structure is set up. So this is a traditional hierarchy in an organization where it has like a separation of like levels. So like each level is like a different division of labor as well. And so there are like written roles and written communications records. So like people speaking down, that's downwards communication. People speaking upwards, that's upwards communication. Sometimes in organizations there's no upward mobility in terms of speaking to people. Going over the head of someone in an organization would be skipping one of those levels. If you think about how like this works, it looks like that you need the bottom to facilitate the people at the top. But at the same time, like, is that how it always works? Is that how it is? Like, can people move up? Can people do this? Can people go over the head of someone? Can, how does this really play out in an organization? Is this what it is? Well, I think it doesn't give us the full picture. Connections to people around us are a huge factor in what we know, how we think, and how we think of what to do. And so like each person has like a different interpretation of what is going on in a system. I mean, like a small piece of knowledge, each person has like a small piece of knowledge out of the whole system, right? But like if you're going to be like, and in a system you need people to lead and guide, because not everybody wants to be a leader. It's not something that everybody wants. Some people just want to do this, some people enjoy doing that. So like sometimes you need to bring in a leader to help run the system, manage the system. But who's the right person for it? Someone who can get a holistic picture as much as possible. So each person here has a small piece of knowledge of the whole system. And so to be able to manage the system properly, we need to have that holistic picture where we understand everybody, or try our best to understand everybody and what's going on. And that is done through social network analysis. That's done through social network analysis. And I didn't mean to click that, but I guess we are. So basically it's like connections, like I said, that's a huge factor. Well, social network analysis offers huge potential for like offering a deeper and richer, accurate understanding of these systems, because they kind of like make up our world, since it like allows us to study the structure of influence within corporations. Notice how it's a little different. Instead of going up to down, it's kind of like sideways, like, or in front of us, so like he goes here, he goes there. So like, for example, the way we're looking at it here is this person has barely any influence because he's connected to one person, but this one person knows this person, and this person knows this person. It just branches off. That's why this is a network. And so this one's red because he is kind of like a center. He's centralized because he has the most amount of connections, like he can reach out to all these people, he knows all these people. And also without him, there's a problem. He's the bridge to a lot of people. Like he doesn't know anyone but this person. So like if he needed this guy, he would have to go through him, right? This is kind of like, they call this the broker in the social network analysis model. So a model is graphed using graph theory and stuff. Graph theory talks about, like, for example, each part here is an individual, and so like the circle would be kind of like a node. But like I think I am going to talk about this in another slide, so I don't want to get too in depth about it. So what I'm going to talk about is like well, we could talk about like how like modeling the actual flow of the network, or as a network, we can get a different picture of where like irrelevant employees within the hierarchy that we saw in the last slide can have a significant impact within a network that we didn't see in the hierarchical ordering, because it doesn't show that level of influence. It doesn't show that. And so like each person, like I said, has a different interpretation. And like the cool thing about social network analysis is information is like transferred between like people who can be studied, but like many other social processes can be used to understand outcomes and manage the system better for its intended outcome. So not just information being traveled, but we could say that money is being traveled, as that's another process. Instead of just information being relayed or doing, going over, you could use money, you could use projects, influence, a bunch of random stuff, right? Like analyzing a social network itself is like, it allows us to like spot trends and like understand conversation by like identifying the reach, impact, and activity of like individuals, and like said, each individual has a reach, impact, and activity, and so that's not gonna be possible to understand if you just look at a hierarchical ordering. And so I want to make sure that we go a little like further on what exactly social network analysis is. Think of this as a node and then this as another node, by the way. These are nodes. Okay? Or that's how I designed it at least. But so like social network analysis is actually relatively new in comparison to other methodologies when it comes to statistical observations. Like right now, new techniques are being invented for SNA. SNA is social network analysis. Like new algorithms are constantly being made up to create new forms of mapping connections. Connections me to you, node to node, right? Peer to peer to peer. No, but you get it. So anyway, we can find patterns and like forces much better because like we can kind of like understand the individuals and how they're connected. And so like we talked a little bit about social capital already. So an example is observing a LinkedIn profile. Like I can have 500 connections, but that doesn't mean all 500 people in my network are inclined to help me when I'm looking for a position. If I focus on a weaker tie where there's some profile that I'm not even connected with, but I have a mutual connection with that can introduce me and set up a introductory email chain going and vouch for me, for example, right? That could go well. That could definitely go well. And that happens a lot. A lot of people do that. Like, hey, I got a mutual friend on here. Could you like introduce me to him, or what do you know about this person? Blah 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 blah. And then a lot of things come into fruition. And you guys gotta take that stuff, by the way, random. But like, you're not lucky if you're shy. But anyway, so like I said, everyone has reach, impact, and activity, and that's our social capital. Allows us to identify. This whole thing allows us to identify like our individual social capital, and it could also help us predict our trajectory, which is really cool because you can kind of see how your influence is among other people in your network and whatnot. I mean, like I'm gonna talk about this in another slide, but it's kind of like about like the weight. So there's also weight when it comes to social network analysis, where it's like when I say weight, I mean like the level of impact you have when you're communicating with one of your relationships, right? Not all relationships are treated the same. Our energy is given differently based on who we're interacting with. Anyway, I'm gonna move on to the next one, but like one thing that I really want to focus on is the definition itself is important to know. It's a study of social phenomena and empirical data as networks, and so it's not just data. It's not just data. It also talks about the social phenomena. And like to be able to even like work on a social network analysis, you kind of have to have like an experience of the stuff that you're analyzing itself to kind of understand like what kind of like models or attributes are going to be included in your observation, kind of like understand a little deeper so you can make these relations or understand or deduce from the data that's given in the cluster. Says can lead to a realization of culture, politics, history. It could show you a lot. Like talk about it in the next one. Let me just make sure I'm not going over. Okay, so like we can use social network analysis to understand how like these bonds form and also change over time. So like just because I'm buddy now with someone else doesn't mean we might not have a fall. We might like be buddy for the rest of eternity. Like there's a gap, and sometimes gaps are closed and we get out of touch. Just part of life sometimes, right? But like social network analysis, like without social network analysis, it's hard to identify how these bonds form and change. Why? Because context. It's necessary. You can't be all things to all people. Like if I act one way that I act with my close friends to another person, they might receive it differently. And that's also known as the context collapse in human-computer interaction, which is deviating from, or it's not what we're discussing. So I'm going to just lay off on that for now. Maybe talk about it at the end. But yeah, real life situations cannot be reduced to abstractions. And that's important to know because you can't just say that like, every there's an individual, and then there's specifics about that individual, right? Like we're all different people with different opinions, and so you can't just say everybody is the same and then take that context that you're enforcing on a study with all this data. You have to be able to understand the relationships of this individual and how how they interact, what kind of what kind of people are in the network and whatnot. Get some water one side. Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to clear my throat. I don't know why it's like that, but the important part that I was trying to get at was kind of like statistical frameworks today. They kind of like lack the ability to quantify these individual points, and so that's why this is important. It's like a regular network is empirical, but like a social network can focus on the social phenomena as well, and so it allows us to like spot these trends, understands conversation, yeah, and so forth. And this is kind of a cool idea to understand. Like this is kind of like building a continuum, right? Understanding what's right, what's wrong, whatnot. That's important to understand the person, right? The individual, to understand what's right, what's wrong, that continuum from both sides. Now we're gonna talk about like the models and whatnot itself. So the building blocks of SNA. Okay. So as you can see that we talked about in the prior slides, this is a node, and then this is the edge, right? And this is a vertex, right? It's between the two. And this is a vertex, technically vertex, right? But let's just call this a node, okay? Let's call this an edge. And so the idea here is we're going to talk about this real quick. So this node right here has how many connections? One connection, two connections. This person can only, this has two as well. This one has 1, 2, 3. So this is considered the center, right? This one would have the most impact because to be able to talk to this person, you'd have to go through this guy. So like, let's say Billy wants to send a message to this guy. He has to send a message to him, and then he can send a message to him. It's relaying it. He is going to be in this situation known as the broker. So if the way to identify if some vertex or I meant to say some node is a broker also known as bridge, is by removing this node and seeing if it breaks the whole cluster, not the cluster, but like the whole model. Sorry. And so the way it works is a link between, well, you can read this here, but basically every link here, so this right here, could be a social connection. So this could be my brother, and this could be my dad, and then this could be my mom. And so or no, this could be me, this could be my mom, this could be my dad, right? And that's kind of like completed. And so one thing that's important to understand is the direction. And so like in that situation, it's undirectional. But like if I'm talking to this person right here, that's directional. So let's say this is my family, and then this is my neighbor, right? But let's say, or no, this is my friend, right? And my friend doesn't know my parents, okay? They don't have my friend's number, but I have my friend's number. I could send a text message to my friend. My friend can send a text message to me. Maybe my mom's not feeling well. My friend sends a text message to me and says, hey, yo, tell your mom, like, feel better or whatnot, right? That's just to frame the way we're going to think about this stuff. But, like, to be more specific, and instead of, like, me just saying all of that, I mean, like, the way it works is, like, both the absence and the presence of links, they signify a relationship. So, like I said, removing this and saying, or just having this could identify that I don't have if then this is my father, I could identify my mom's not in the network or something. I don't know. That's kind of sounds a little sad in that example. My mom's well alive. Let me just move on from that example. But a network is simply like a number of points, and so like in this analysis, like this could be like it says in the slide: friendship, marital, family tie, or financial. Blue circles, nodes, etc. and vertices between the two are like called adjacents. Probably could have just kept it more simple for that slide, but oh well. So, analyzing social network. This is important because, like, when modeling an object, the type of relationship is critical when the vertices of the network can be easily defined. So this is an individual, right? And this is one cluster. This is like a complete cluster. This is a cluster, and this is another part, right? Another component. This is a bridge. This is a broker, because without this, there would be no access to this, right? So the cool thing is, if you think about networking with people, right? Meeting people, and like say LinkedIn, right? This is kind of like the social butterfly, right? He knows no, he doesn't know all these people. I lied. But like, he knows this person who knows all these people, and then he knows this person that knows these people. This person probably knows that this person knows this person, but this person doesn't know this person, and that could be a little triad right there, right now. And you could tell this guy, hey, yo, introduce me to this guy or gal, right? And so, like, we're again applying graph theory, and when modeling an object, the type of relationship, like I said, was critical to understand how the dynamic works. When a network is analyzed, we can find different things, like this is how people find it. When you're scrolling through Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, any of these social media sites, they could find out a lot about you, right? They could find out what you want to buy, who you might want to add as a friend, right? And the buying part is a marketing strategy called remarketing. Feel free to Google it, but it's basically uses your data and says, okay, like this guy likes this stuff, let's introduce him to this stuff, other stuff that's similar to this stuff, because he's more susceptible to be a customer for this product that we're gonna advertise. He's that demographic. He's part of the target market demographic. So that's remarketing. But it could also introduce us to people that we want to add as friends in the system. And so when you're building a system as a developer, it kind of is important to understand how relationships are going to work in your application and how you interact with other people if there's going to be a social network aspect. And so, like, analysis can lead to the realization of many things, like culture, politics, history, and they're a huge factor in what we know, how we think, and I've said this before, how we think of what to do. Now, there's a saying my friend Angelo once told me, and it's like, it's just stuck with me. It's like, you can learn anything from anyone, and that's what to do or what not to do. And you could learn that in network easily. There are two types of networks. There's a two-mode network, and then there's a one-mode network. And so the idea is basically like the one-mode. Oh, before we even talk about the one-mode network, two-mode network formally analyzes individuals between institutions, right? We focus on the vertices of a different type instead of like individual tensors, and then ultimately it kind of like converts to the one mode, right? And the one mode is like a connection between nodes of organization, people, concepts, right? Dang, I went through that last slide really fast. Probably practice. Hopefully I get better at this one. So modeling can lead us to situations where relations have a direction. Okay, so this is kind of like directed graphs and undirected graphs. So this is what I was talking about. Like A can send a message to B. B can't send a message to A, but B can send a message to C. C can't send a message to A, but C can't message B anyway. They can't. It's just forward, right? That's direction, though. Okay. This means A can send a message to B, B can send a message to A, and then C can send a message to C, and then C can send and then B can send a message to C. This one is this is a party right here. Like A can send a message to C, C can send that message to B, B can send that message to C, and vice versa, right? This one's just in a circle this way as my mouse is going, right? There's nothing else deeper than that, right? And I don't know why there's 1, 2, 3, this is the same thing. Oops. Okay, let's focus on this example right here, right? Modeling can lead us to situations where relations have a direction. Okay, so student 4 right here can talk to student 1, right? Student 1 can talk to student 2, right? Student 2 can talk to student 1. Student 1 can't talk to student 3, but student 3 can talk to student 2, and student 2 can talk to student 3, and student 3 can talk back to student 1 again, as mentioned in the example 2 before that. right? So this is the conversation. This kind of explains how it works, right? As you can see, there will never be a part where student 1 talks to student 4. It's only it's directional. So it's going here to here, not here to here. And also there's different sizes and different colors. We're going to talk about that in a sec. But we're going to focus on a little bit about development of relationships in a network. As we said before, like these bonds that you form, they change. And like think about it like this. All right. This is outside of the slides, but this is a cool example. So like think about like let's say like you have a friend and you talk to this guy a lot, guy or girl, and then they end up in a relationship, right? So now they have less time because they're focused a little bit on the relationship, right? That relationship over time changes as a result, right? In that sense, in that example, that's kind of a low level, but like that's just how it works, right? So social networks, like it allows us to kind of like identify who are the important people in these groups that are formed around topics of personal characteristics, right? I mean, back then, by the way, we used to use like surveys, interviews, and observations, and then look, or like even photos, looking at photos and analyzing interaction, how people interacted with that photo. That's how we would analyze social networks, and we would do a computational analysis of matrices. Matrices are also used in this actual model when you're using graph theory and whatnot. But that's like when you're like, you could also like talk about like big scale, like when you're dealing like huge clusters and stuff. But the idea is like that would give us the understanding of a social network, right? It allows us, and social network analysis, by the way, like it's just straight math, like allows us to mathematically like analyze the total of like a relationship. And one thing to focus on is like when I said the directional, right? That's from A to B, but undirectional could be like kind of like when you're on Facebook, right? You add someone as a friend, right? You add someone as a friend. When you add them as a friend, they're your friend too, right? It becomes a mutual friendship, okay? That's undirectional because you both have that same relationship with each other, okay? And so when you have other factors, when I mentioned like the girlfriend thing, right? Your relationship with him was higher, but when they got in a relationship, the weight that relationship that you have with them holds is lowered. And that's because they have another relationship that they formed that they're focusing more energy on, which is okay. Okay? So that's important to understand because it kind of allows us to make assumptions based off this data, what's going on and how the data changes over time and whatnot, right? And so we have to study these relationships through combining information together and understanding what kind of influence people have and how it changes. Okay. Now let's look at this example. So let's say each node, based on color, red, purple, green. Let's say they over time spend time together. Over time. This is a relationship as it started. What do you guys think it'll look like after? Like, let's say, I don't know, a while. I don't know when a while is, but over time, right? Well, due to homophily, which is a tendency to choose to form a bond with similar others, despite there being other types of people within the group, the millennials, or sorry, this was Gen Z. The Gen Z are together. As you can see, Gen Z over here too as well. And then the millennials are together. And then the Gen X right here, he's all alone because he has no one to relate to. There's also two other types. There's also selection, and then there's social influence. So like, let's say I'm part of a network, and in my network there are non-smokers and smokers alike. But due to social influence, I can be susceptible to becoming a smoker. And there's also not only social influence, but selection. So like selection could be like, let's say I speak the same language as someone else, right? So I'm going to choose to be part of that group because we have similarities. As we talked about the relationship example, the weighting, right? That's important to understand. But the way this works is the edges are thicker, and that identifies weight. Not all connections are created equally, as you guys know. We talked a little bit about the LinkedIn example. Unweighted calculations aren't enough when identifying leverage points. Like for example, like when you're looking for that job on LinkedIn, you connect with 1,000 random people, but you might not have the same impact as someone with 100 connections because it's quality over quantity. It's also about who you know, with a little bit about what okay, yeah. But it is also about how strong or weak your relationship is with that person that you're communicating with. Unweighted, weighted. You can calculate with an unweighted graph, but you might have different results that aren't going to give you a full picture, holistic picture. This is the holistic picture with the weighting. Oh yeah, we're back to this picture. And why are we back to this picture? Because we're gonna talk a little bit about centrality and the analysis of this model. And so like if you think about like on the individual level, like right here, the social capital that this guy has, he has more impact. He has more impact as well because this size is bigger, right? The size is bigger because of the fact that like they have more interactions. And the color is also different. The color represents the role the participants have, right? That's coming in between. And like this guy is mediating interactions for student 4, right? I can't talk to this guy, but he can talk to this guy or gal. So it's equal. So this is equal because of that. See, I can't talk to this person, but oh wait, yeah, no, I played myself because I can't even talk to this person. This one would have more impact, plus it's connected more. But like, regardless, you guys get, or you get it. Anyway, that sums it up. All right.